The document exists. The negotiators have seen it. The mediators have signed off. Multiple U.S. officials speaking on the record have confirmed its contents. A senior Iranian spokesperson said just yesterday that they were successful in getting key terms included. And yet, as of this morning, May 29, 2026, Donald Trump has not signed it. The Iran deal is written. It is sitting there, fully drafted, the product of 3 months of the most consequential back-channel diplomacy of the 21st century. And the reason it hasn't been signed is not what the headlines are telling you. There is not one reason. There are 5, and every single one of them tells you something important, not just about this deal, but about whether any deal with Iran can actually hold. Let's go through them one by one. First, let's establish what's actually in the document, because most coverage is either too vague or too technical, and the result is that audiences have no idea what is actually being offered and what is actually being asked. The proposed deal is a Memorandum of Understanding, an MOU. It is not a final peace treaty. It is not a complete resolution of the Iran nuclear question. It is, specifically, a 60-day framework, a structured pause, an agreement to stop fighting while both sides sit down to negotiate the harder questions. Here is what Iran would agree to do within that 60-day window. Reopen the Strait of Hormuz with no tolls and no restrictions. Clear the mines it deployed in the strait to let ships pass freely. Commit, in writing, to never pursuing a nuclear weapon. Agree to negotiate a suspension of its uranium enrichment program. Agree to negotiate the removal of its stockpile of highly enriched uranium, the material that, if weaponized, would bring Iran to the threshold of a nuclear bomb. Here is what America would agree to do. Lift its naval blockade on Iranian ports, which has been in place since April 13th. Negotiate over lifting sanctions on Iran during the 60-day period. Negotiate over unfreezing Iranian funds, billions of dollars sitting in overseas banks, though those steps would only be implemented once a final, verifiable agreement is reached. Keep U.S. forces in the region throughout the 60-day window. Only withdraw those forces if a final deal is actually signed. There is one more provision that has barely been covered. The MOU would also declare an end to the war between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. That is not a footnote. That is a major structural demand buried in a document that most people think is only about Hormuz. According to CNN, a senior Iranian spokesperson confirmed Thursday that Iran had been successful in securing the release of half of its blocked overseas assets, roughly $12 billion, to be included in the MOU terms. The phrase used by U.S. officials to describe their position on the nuclear stockpile. No dust, no dollars. Iran does not receive economic relief until the highly enriched uranium is gone. That phrase is doing a lot of diplomatic work right now. That is the deal. Now let's talk about why it isn't signed. The first reason is the simplest, and also the most explosive. Iran's Supreme Leader has not approved it. This is the detail that changes everything, and the Jerusalem Post broke it Thursday morning. Mojtaba Khamenei, Iran's new Supreme Leader, who assumed power on March 8, 2026, after his father Ali Khamenei was killed in the opening strikes of Operation Epic Fury, has not given his approval. The negotiators have agreed. The foreign minister has agreed. The parliament speaker has agreed. But Khamenei has not approved the MOU. And here is why that matters more than anything else. Mojtaba Khamenei is in hiding. Fox News reported Thursday, citing experts, that the new Supreme Leader has spent nearly 3 months underground as a designated target of U.S. and Israeli military operations. He was wounded in the same strike that killed his father on February 28th. His wife and son were killed in that strike. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth described him as wounded and likely disfigured. He has not made a public appearance. His location is unknown even to most senior Iranian officials. Messages from Khamenei's office travel by courier, not encrypted digital channels, physical couriers. The response latency on decisions coming from his office is measured in days, not hours. As one analyst quoted by Fox News put it, officials at the highest levels of the Iranian government do not know where he is. Every piece of information he receives is dated, and his responses come with significant latency. Think about what that means for a negotiation. America's team is ready to sign. Iran's foreign minister is ready to sign. The document is agreed. And somewhere, in a location known to perhaps 3 or 4 people on Earth, a man who is wounded, in hiding, communicating through human messengers, who watched his father be killed and his wife and son be killed by the country he is now being asked to make a deal with. That man has to decide whether to approve. Trump has not signed because Khamenei has not signed. And Khamenei has not signed because, under those circumstances, his decision-making process is not operating on the timeline that Washington expects. The second reason Trump hasn't signed is Iran's internal fracture, a political fault line that is threatening to blow up the negotiations from the inside. CNN published a detailed investigation into what they called Iran's super revolutionaries, a faction within Iran's political system that is actively working to sabotage any deal. Their name is the Paydari Front. Their position is this: the United States killed Iran's supreme leader, killed senior commanders, bombed nuclear facilities, and is now asking Iran to surrender its nuclear program. Negotiating with people who did that is not diplomacy. It is submission. One article in Raja News, the Paydari Front's affiliated media, published during the negotiations and quoted by CNN. They realized that killing our leaders, commanders, and loved ones costs them nothing. They understood that even if they martyr our imam, there are still groups here willing to negotiate, shake hands with Witkoff, Vance, and Kushner, and smile at the killers of our martyred imam. This is not a fringe voice easily dismissed. Former National Security Chief Saeed Jalili, a prominent Paydari figure, received 13 million votes in Iran's 2024 presidential election. He is not marginal. He represents a constituency inside Iran that has a principled, deeply felt objection to this deal on terms that have nothing to do with nuclear physics or economic calculation. It is a question of honor, of whether Iran capitulates to the country that killed its leadership. Any deal that Khamenei signs will face this opposition internally. Any deal that appears to give the United States what it bombed Iran to get will be used by this faction to destabilize whatever government survives. That political pressure is real, and it is why Iranian negotiators keep insisting at every turn that Iran's right to enrichment must be acknowledged, even while they offer to suspend it. They are negotiating not just against Washington, they are negotiating against their own hardliners. The third reason is the gap that won't close between what Trump says he wants and what Iran says it will give. Washington's stated position, repeated by both Trump and Bessent this week, is the no dust, no dollars framework. Iran must turn over its highly enriched uranium stockpile, the material enriched to 60% and above that represents the most dangerous element of its nuclear program. It must agree that it cannot have a nuclear program, and the Strait of Hormuz must be open before any economic relief is discussed. Iran's position on enrichment has not moved. Tehran has said its right to enrich uranium is non-negotiable. Under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which Iran has signed, states have the right to enrich uranium for peaceful purposes. Iran's negotiators see zero enrichment as an Israeli demand that the U.S. is carrying as a proxy, not an American demand rooted in genuine security concern. The proposed compromise that has been discussed in the 60-day window, a moratorium on enrichment lasting somewhere between 12 and 20 years. The U.S. wanted 20 years. Iran proposed 5. The current discussions are reportedly around 12. After the moratorium, Iran would be allowed to enrich to 3.67%, exactly the level permitted under Obama's JCPOA, the deal Trump spent his entire first term calling the worst deal ever made. Here is the irony that the Times of Israel made explicit this week. The deal Trump is close to signing is not significantly better than the deal he tore up in 2018. Longer moratorium, yes. More intrusive inspections, possibly. But the fundamental architecture, Iran caps enrichment, America lifts sanctions, is the same. Trump called JCPOA a horrible deal and the most embarrassing agreement in diplomatic history. He may sign something that looks remarkably similar, negotiated at the cost of a war that has killed thousands, disrupted the global oil supply for 3 months, and cost the U.S. Treasury $25 billion. That political problem, how does Trump sell this to his own base, is the third obstacle sitting between the document and the signature. The fourth reason is Benjamin Netanyahu, and this one has become perhaps the single most difficult variable in the entire negotiation. Netanyahu wants zero enrichment. He has said it publicly and repeatedly. He wants a Libya-style deal, complete dismantlement of Iran's nuclear infrastructure, not a managed reduction of it. His argument? Any enrichment capability, even at 3.67%, is a breakout capability. Even a 12-year moratorium is a countdown clock, not a solution. The Times of Israel reported this week that Trump has been forced to warn Netanyahu not to strike Iran while negotiations are ongoing. Trump told reporters that he had told Netanyahu a strike would be inappropriate to do right now because we're very close to a solution. That is extraordinary. The President of the United States telling the Prime Minister of Israel to stand down from a military operation that Israel wants to conduct in a negotiation that Israel does not believe in. Every time the deal gets close, the Israeli factor becomes the gravitational force pulling it backward. The MOU includes a provision ending the Israel-Hezbollah war in Lebanon. Israel has not publicly confirmed or denied its position on that provision. But the tense phone call that CNN confirmed between Trump and Netanyahu, described as covering the Lebanon ceasefire clause, is a signal that Israel's agreement is not given and not guaranteed. Trump's political coalition includes a significant portion of voters who prioritize the U.S.-Israel relationship as a near absolute value. Signing a deal that Netanyahu publicly opposes or that Israel publicly calls insufficient carries real domestic political risk for Trump in a way that almost no other foreign policy decision does. That calculation is in the room with every negotiator, even when no Israeli diplomat is present. The fifth reason is the one happening right now, today, even as negotiations were supposedly in their final phase. On the night of May 27th, at 10:17 p.m. Eastern Time, Iran launched a ballistic missile at Kuwait. Kuwaiti air defenses intercepted it. U.S. Central Command called it an egregious ceasefire violation. Kuwait's Ministry of Foreign Affairs condemned what it called a criminal Iranian attack that was a direct threat to the lives of civilians and vital facilities. Saudi Arabia condemned it. Qatar condemned it. The GCC Secretary General condemned it. Iran's Revolutionary Guard said the attack was retaliation for a U.S. strike on Iranian drone launch facilities near the Strait of Hormuz, which the U.S. described as purely defensive. The U.S. struck an Iranian drone ground control station to prevent a fifth drone from being launched, after shooting down 4 others that were threatening the strait. Iran then fired a ballistic missile at an American ally. This is happening while both sides are negotiating a peace agreement, while the document is on the table, while mediators are shuttling between capitals, while Trump says the deal is largely negotiated. This is not unprecedented in the history of negotiations. Both the Vietnam peace talks and the Korean armistice continued while fighting was ongoing. But it creates the defining political problem for Trump. How do you sign a deal with a country that just fired a ballistic missile at your ally, is simultaneously bombing Kuwait, is simultaneously threatening ships in the strait, and then walk to a podium and call it a historic diplomatic victory? J.D. Vance, when asked directly whether Trump would sign the MOU, gave the most honest answer of anyone in the administration this week. I think it's hard to say exactly when or if the president is going to sign the MOU. We're going back and forth on a couple of language points. He then added, "We do think they're negotiating, at least so far, in good faith. At least so far, in good faith. That is not the language of a deal about to be signed. That is the language of a deal that could collapse tomorrow." Stand back and look at the full picture. The deal exists. Its terms are known. Its logic is clear. 60 days of reduced hostilities in exchange for a framework to negotiate the nuclear question. Every economic signal, $4.55 gasoline, oil at $102 a barrel, global supply chains still under stress, says a deal is urgently needed. Every diplomatic signal, the mediators, the negotiators, the foreign ministers, says the deal is within reach. And it keeps not happening, because Trump needs Khamenei's signature, and Khamenei communicates by courier from a hidden location. Because Iran's hardliners are calling the negotiators traitors for talking to the people who killed the previous Supreme Leader. Because the deal Trump can actually get looks uncomfortably like the deal he called a historic embarrassment when Obama got it. Because Netanyahu is waiting for a deal he finds acceptable, And that standard keeps moving. Because Iran fired a ballistic missile at Kuwait this week while the ink was still being reviewed. This is what it looks like when two adversaries who have been at war for 3 months, who have never trusted each other, who each have internal factions actively working against the deal, who each have domestic political audiences watching for signs of capitulation, try to write a 60-day pause on a single piece of paper. The document is written. Whether it gets signed depends not on the text, but on whether every one of those 5 obstacles can be cleared simultaneously before someone fires another missile and makes the signing politically impossible. Trump said he was not in a rush. He said he doesn't care about the midterms. He said Iran is negotiating in good faith. He said the deal is largely negotiated. He has not picked up the pen. Subscribe for the next video. What happens if this deal doesn't get signed in the next 48 hours? The military options back on the table. The economic cost of another month with Hormuz closed. And the question that nobody is asking, can Iran actually deliver on what its negotiators are promising if Khamenei is governing from a courier network in a hidden location?